Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with the murder of a little girl that has gone unsolved for 36 years. Today, Toronto police say they have finally cracked the case of Christine Jessop, who was killed in 1984. She was 9 years old when she went missing in Queensville, Ontario, a small town north of Toronto. Police say she had plans to meet a friend at a nearby park after school that day, but never showed up. She took the school bus home, dropped off her bag, and vanished. The case haunted her family and the community. A neighbor was wrongly convicted, exonerated by DNA testing. Today, this man was named as Jessop's killer, Calvin Hoover, who was 28 at the time and known to the family. Police say new DNA technology linked him to the case.
It's genetic genealogy that we have actually used. Genetic genealogy is a very useful tool in murder investigations such as this one. It is not a DNA match. What it is it provides a potential, and I must stress a potential, family lineage from a DNA sample.
In our top story tonight, Eric Sorensen explains how the cold case was cracked, what it means for the Jessop family, and why the killer will never be charged.
It's an announcement few thought they would ever hear.
Calvin Hoover of Toronto, Ontario, was 28 years old in 1984.
A name, finally, for the killer of 9-year-old Christine Jessop, who disappeared this month 36 years ago. The man identified, Calvin Hoover, was an acquaintance of Christine's parents.
This is not a reason to celebrate. It does, however, allow us to take a major step forward in our efforts to bring justice to Christine's family.
Hoover died by suicide 5 years ago. Police say they tracked him down with DNA using a police-only databank in the United States that identified 2 family trees.
The name Calvin Hoover is one of the names that came up in 2 specific families that we saw built out. The name Calvin Hoover, upon review of the investigative file, is a name that we know had a connection to the Jessop family.
There was no trace of Christine when she disappeared. Her body found weeks later, 50 kilometers from her home in Queensville, north of Toronto. She'd been raped and stabbed multiple times. Months later, police charged Jessop's next-door neighbor, 24-year-old Paul Morin, with murder, setting off legal battles that would last a decade. Morin was first acquitted of the crime, but in a second trial in 1992 was found guilty and went to prison. Then DNA technology, still in its infancy, cleared him.
And finally, as I said, DNA has exonerated me 100%.
The case roiled the Ontario justice system and left the Jessop family lost. The trail of the killer had long since gone cold. Her brother, Ken Jessop.
Christine is still dead, and there is still no person no longer accused.
Now, a quarter century later, Ken Jessop spoke with Global News now that Calvin Hoover has been identified.
Disbelief. I was stunned. It's a wonderful day for justice, and at least he saved us the hardship of going through another trial.
This from Paul Morin, who was wrongfully convicted. Christine's murder was a terrible and tragic event. When DNA exonerated me in 1995, I was sure one day DNA would reveal the real killer, and now it has.
This is one of those cases where science has won out over the justice system.
More than 30 years after her daughter died, Janet Jessop told Global News what she'd wanted most.
Where's he? That's the question I have. I want to find him. Him, her, it, whomever. And that's my goal.
Finally, it seems that goal has been reached.
Eric, you first covered Christine Jessop's case when she disappeared more than 30 years ago. Now police have identified her killer, but he's dead. So it's an ending, but is it justice?
Well, it's justice a long time in coming, but it is still justice to finally solve a crime. I mean, that is the ultimate goal whenever there's a tragedy like this. I think there's huge relief for the police because they went down the wrong path after the wrong person at the time. There's relief for the justice system because of the wrongful conviction. And I think for the family, there has to be a sense of closure now because really, the Jessops, year after year, were just wanting answers and they couldn't get the right answer. And looks like now they finally do have an answer as tragic as it ultimately is.
And so, Eric, is the case now closed?
No, it's not closed. Calvin Hoover was known to police because he was part of a wide investigation at the time. He was a friend or at least an acquaintance of the family, so they knew of him, but he was not a suspect at the time. Now they're looking for the public's help in filling in the holes between 1984, when Christine disappeared and died, and 2015 when Hoover died. And so they've got a lot of years to fill in the pieces to try and figure out what he did during all that time.
All right, Eric Sorensen in Toronto, thanks.